Hello students, in the last class we discussed different types of exceptions. Today we are going to learn the syntax of exception handling in Python and the raise statement. So we will take the same example that we discussed in the last class. So if you have not watched the video, please go and watch once. So look at the example. I am accepting two numbers from the user, number 1 and number 2. So we have int function and input function. So we know that if you don't give proper inputs, this line might throw a value error. So I am writing the code to catch value error. So in the fourth line, what I am doing? I am dividing number 1 by number 2 and storing the result in diff. Suppose if the user enters number 2 as 0, it will throw 0 division error. So that error will be caught by except block. So other than value error or 0 division error, if it throws any other types of error, that will be caught by except block. So that is the program we discussed in the last class. So I will add two more blocks to this program. One is else block, another one is finally block. Else, I write print no exception is thrown. Then I will write finally block print I am always executed. So what do you understand from this? Else block will be executed if no exception is thrown by try block. If any exception is thrown by try block, that will be caught by any of the except block. If no exception is thrown by try block, then else block will be executed. So finally block is always executed even if there is an exception or if there is no exception also, the finally block will be executed. So let us save and run the program. I will enter the first number as A. It shows only numbers are allowed. So this line throws a value error. So value error will be caught by value error block. So it prints the message only numbers are allowed. So it shows one more message that I am always executed, that is written inside finally block. So we know that finally block is always executed. I will rerun the program. I enter first number as 12, second number as 0. So in this case, second number is 0. So it throws 0 division error. So that will be caught by 0 division error block. It prints the message second number shouldn't be 0. Then it shows the message I am always executed. I will rerun the program. The first number as 12, second number as 2. So it gives the result 6.0 because there is no exception. Since there is no exception, the else block is executed. It shows the message that no exception is thrown. So I am always executed, that is written inside finally block. So we know that finally block is always executed. I'll just cut this, copy within else block, right? Why I have done like that? Because the print statement result is equal to diff is written as the last line within try block. So if any of the exception occurs, anyway that line will not be executed. So that line will be executed only if there is no exception. So that I have given that line inside else block. I'll run the program. Give 12, give 4. So it runs successfully. Now we will learn the theoretical explanation of syntax of exception handling. So any code that might throw an exception should be written within try block. So we have except blocks, first except block, second except block, third except block. So we can write multiple except blocks. So you know that we have written in the previous example as value error, 0 division error. All those can be written one by one. Finally, we can write except block. That is the super class of all these classes. So except block should be written at the last. Then we have else block, no exception is raised. Then we have finally block, this block is always executed. Now let's discuss these blocks one by one. So look at the diagram. Try block will throw an exception. If it throws an exception, that will be caught by except blocks. So one of the except block. So we know that we can have multiple except blocks in the program. If try block does not throw any exception, then else block will be executed. So finally block is always executed. So what is try block? It contains the statements where there may be one or more exceptions. If it feels that your code might throw an exception, that should be put inside try block. A single try block can be followed by several except blocks. So we can have multiple except blocks. Even if some exception arises inside a try block, the program will not be terminated. So program will not be terminated abnormally. But if one line throws an exceptions, next line will not be executed. It will go to except block. So what is except block? This block catches the exception that is raised in the try block. So either exception is raised using raise keyword, that we'll be learning in this video, or an exception is thrown by the Python interpreter. If the exception is thrown or exception is raised, in both cases the exception will be caught by except block. This block is executed only if there is an exception inside try block. If there is no exception, then except blocks will not be executed. When an exception is raised, a search for the matching except is made till it is handled. So when try block throws an exception, the Python interpreter will search for the except block that matches that exception. For example, if a value error is thrown by try block, Python interpreter will search for value error except block. If a zero division error is thrown by try block, then Python interpreter will search for zero division error except block. If no match is found, then the program terminates. If you have not written the code to handle the exception, then the program terminated abnormally. If an exception is raised for which no handler is created by the programmer, then such as exception is handled by adding an except clause, should be added as the last clause of try except block. It says that if you have not handled the exception or individually, for example, if you have not written any except block for value error, if you have not written any except block for zero division error, then you can write only except block. So all the types of exception will be caught by except block. Else block. Else block is executed if no exception is raised in the try block. An except block will be executed only if some exception is raised in the try block. So else block is just opposite of except block. Except block will be executed only if there is an exception, but else block will be executed if there is no exception. So look at the example. Same example I have given numerator is equal to 50. Denominator will be accepted from the user. The quotient is calculated as numerator divided by denominator. Then division performed successfully. If there is no exception, it will print division performed successfully. But if there is a zero division error, for example, if the user enters denominator as 0, then that will throw an exception that will be caught by zero division error except block. If this code produces any other exception other than zero division error, that will be caught by except block. If there is no exception, what happens? The quotient will be calculated. That quotient value will be displayed inside else block. Finally block. The statements inside finally block are always executed. It won't check whether the exception has occurred in the try block or not. It is an optional block. Else block and try blocks are optional. It is a common practice to use finally clause while working with files to ensure that the file object is closed. So this concept will come in next chapter. There you will understand it better. So you will open multiple files using objects. Before you stop executing the program, all the file objects should be closed. If you're writing the process to close the object in finally block, you don't have to worry about it. Why? Because finally block is always executed regardless of any condition. Finally should always be placed at the end of try clause. Finally should be used after all except blocks and else block. I will cut this part of the code and I am trying to execute it. It shows an error. Expected except or finally block. So you cannot write else without except block. Now I will remove else block. I am trying to run the program. It runs successfully. I am always executed. Now I am going to remove all the except blocks and else block. But still it executes. There is no error. Now let us learn about raise statement in Python. Raise statements are used to throw an exception forcefully. Till now we learned different types of exceptions. All those exceptions were thrown by the compiler during execution. For example, if you try to divide a number by 0, Python interpreter will throw a zero division error. If you give a wrong indentation, Python interpreter will throw indentation error. But some cases the programmer will have to throw the exception forcefully or raise the exception forcefully. In such situation we are using raise statement. So let us see the example for raise statement. So look at the example. Number 1 is assigned the value 12 and we are accepting a value for number 2 from the user. Okay. After that we are dividing number 1 by number 2 and storing the value in diff. Then we are printing the result. Okay. So we know that number 2, if it is equal to 0, we cannot perform the calculation. So what we will do? Raise exception. What is the exception name? Zero division error. So save this program, run the program. I will enter the value as 0. So it throws zero division error, right? But it is not displaying any message, just showing the error. So let me modify the program. I write here number cannot be 0. Okay, so I am passing some argument to this exception and run the program. Enter the number as 0. It raises an exception, zero division error, and print the message that number cannot be 0. So I have written the code only to raise an exception. Okay, it is same as throwing the exception by interpreter. So this code should be caught by except blocks. So what I should do? This code I will cut, write try block, paste it. Then I write except block to catch the exception. Except, what is the error? Zero division error. Copy, paste, print 0 is not allowed. Okay, now I have given the code to handle the exception. Again I am writing except block finally. Except, print exception. Right. Okay, now you see I have given here one message as argument. Here also I have given one message. Let's see which message will be displayed. Give number as 0. It shows 0 is not allowed. Which message? The message that we wrote inside except block. Now, if there is no except block, it will print this argument message If there is an except block, it will print the message inside the except block. Now let's see the theory part of raise statement. The raise statement can be used to throw an exception forcefully. So what is the syntax? Raise, space, exception name and argument. Okay. Argument is the message to be displayed with the exception name. So the argument is optional, that is not mandatory. The error detected may be built-in exception or user-defined exception. So the error that we write after raise statement, it can be a user-defined exception or it can be a built-in exception. So look at this code. Here I have taken a list 10, 20, 40, 50. So what is the number of elements? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So what is the last index? The last index will be 0, 1, 2, 3. 3 is the last index, right? Okay. So now I am initializing index to 5. If the index is greater than length of list minus 1, the length of list is 4. 4 minus 1 is 3. That is the last index. If index is greater than 3, so what is index here? 5. 5 is greater than 3. Then we should raise index error, because if the index is greater than 3, there is no element exist at that particular index. So we cannot access that element. So in this case, we are raising index error. Okay. After raise statement, I have written a statement, print statement after exception. So once if the raise statement is executed, this message will never be printed. If the index is not greater than last index, then it will print list 1 of index. So in this case, 5 is greater than last index, so it has raised index error. The user has raised an exception but has not displayed an error explicitly. Look at this, we are raising an exception but we are not passing any argument, so it won't show any message. As the index is greater than the length of the list 1, index error exception is raised. Since the statement after exception is given after the raise statement, it is not executed. So this print statement is given after raise, so that the print statement is not executed. So I hope syntax of exception and raise statements are clear to you. So everybody please like my video, subscribe it, share to all the class 12 and second PUC computer science students. Thank you.